And joining me now is former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen, who also plans to attend the trial tomorrow. He's the author of the book Revenge. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time with me this afternoon. So I just wanted to start with, given how instrumental you were to this case, what do you think it will be like to see Trump face to face for the first time in 5 years tomorrow?
Well, for me, I'm okay now. I mean, obviously, 5 years ago when I was going through my torment, it would have been very difficult. But right now, I'm looking forward to actually seeing him in the courtroom. I'd like him to be able to look me in the face to understand that he's created this, and this is the first time in his entire life that he is going to be held accountable and have to deal with the repercussions of his own personal actions.
As you said, Michael, it's the first time he's really being held accountable on this front. Why do you think it took so long for authorities to prove he was misrepresenting his assets on official financial documents?
Yeah, so remember that the Trump Organization is really a glorified mom and pop type company. You're talking about a very myopic real estate branding company. Very similar to like the mafia. There's a code of silence, omerta, so to speak, at the Trump Organization. So with a privately held company, it's incredibly difficult to understand how they value assets, how they handle the business, unless you have an insider there that's willing to give up that information, which is something that I did in 7 congressional hearings, the one that you showed, 23 occasions to the DA, to the New York Attorney General. I mean, look, let me be very clear about something. There is no recovery for Donald as a result of the civil case being brought tomorrow by Attorney General Tish James.
This ruling is called a corporate death sentence by a number of people. You obviously are playing a key role in this, but you're also a lawyer. What will it mean for Trump to lose control over several of his real estate holdings in New York? What does that actually look like?
Well, first of all, I believe that it's more than just several. Once he loses the license within which to operate, the good standing of the certificates of incorporation that make up what's called the Trump Corporation, not only is the main company now going into the receivership, but there are hundreds of other subsidiary companies that additionally will ultimately go as part of the receivership. It is a financial catastrophe. It is the death blow to Donald. And I'll tell you, during my tenure at the Trump Organization, I can tell you this has always been his biggest fear, that he would lose money, that he would lose all of his money, and that he would no longer be considered the mega billionaire that he tried to portray himself as.
What do you expect, knowing him as you do, given this trial is out there, all of this is just going to happen in broad daylight, how is he going to handle this in public?
Yeah, not well. And again, that assumes that he actually appears tomorrow for it. Knowing Donald the way I do, I would say that there's less than a 20% chance that he actually shows up. What is he showing up for? To sit there and to watch? He's not being called tomorrow. He's going to sit and watch as the judge listens to testimony based upon how the valuations were wrong, how the judge Engoron is going to determine the extent of the damages. And as Tish James, our unsinkable New York Attorney General, said, there is a baseline here of $250 million. She does not believe that it will be less than $250 million. I suspect it'll be in excess of $600 million. And, one of the things, Jen, that you asked me before about how it affects the company, I want to be clear about something. Most of the buildings, actually all of the buildings that Donald had built here in New York City, are condominiums. It is not as if he owns those buildings. What he has is a management company to operate them, but for the most part, other than several apartments in various different buildings, it's owned by individuals like you and me, the same way you would own your home pursuant to what's called a fee simple absolute title holder. So it's not going to affect it that way, but he does have commercial space. He has some garages, he has restaurants, he has commercial space. All of those assets, including, say, Trump Tower, not the residential side, but the commercial side that is office space, all of that will go into receivership and ultimately get liquidated in order to pay off the amounts of money that Judge Engoron will ultimately determine.
So you know him well. You just said, which is pretty significant, that he may not, you don't think he's going to show up. 80% you don't think he's going to show up, even though he said he was going to on Friday. He's also on the witness list. Do you think, if they've said he would testify if he was called, do you think that's the case?
I don't. I mean, he didn't testify before the E. Jean Carroll case, though he said that he looked forward to it. Remember, not everything that Donald says. In fact, most of the things that Donald says turns out not to be true. So do I think he wants to come in and testify? The answer is no. One of the worst things is when Donald does testify, because the more Donald testifies, the more he implicates himself.
We've heard State Attorney General, the unsinkable, I'll say, Letitia James, give you a lot of credit for this suit. Do you think Trump understands, if you're preparing to even look him in the eye if he shows up tomorrow, do you think he understands or thought you'd be as formidable as an enemy when you parted ways?
Well, one of the reasons that he asked me to come to work for him in 2006 is for exactly this reason. He obviously, whoever he listened to that told him it would be a good idea to throw me under the bus, well, I think he should be on the phone with them having a conversation. But one of the other mistakes that they made is when I had said to Emily Fox at Vanity Fair that I would take a bullet for him. It was, at the time, it was a true statement that I was making, but I wouldn't take the bullet if he was the one pulling the trigger. And he was the one here pulling the trigger. So, look, this is all on him. Again, it is the first time in his entire life that he is not only being held accountable for his dirty deeds, but he's suffering the repercussions of them as well.
Very quickly, before I let you go, Trump was actually scheduled to give a deposition on Tuesday in the $500 million lawsuit he filed against you. Do you think he decided to say he was attending the trial in New York in order to delay that deposition?
Listen, with Donald, you never know. He clearly, it's not the first time that he's delayed that. It would actually now be the third time. And the interesting part of this scenario is the fact that Donald is the plaintiff. Whoever heard of a defendant having to try to force a plaintiff to proceed with a lawsuit, especially one for $500 million? He knows it's frivolous. He knows that the worst thing would be for me to depose him because, as he also said, he needed Todd Blanche to be there to ensure that he doesn't end up implicating himself in what would normally be a crime, and so he needs him there in order to assert his Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination. This whole case is absolutely batty, and I do believe that it will ultimately be dismissed, whether or not he shows up for a deposition.
Michael Cohen, thank you. We'll look forward to hearing about it if you do see him face to face. Thanks for joining me today.